There are some recordings that were never meant to be heard. Desperate voices captured in their final moments. Phone calls that start as a plea for help, only to end in silence. These are the kinds of recordings that stay with you. The ones that turn tragedy into something more real, more immediate, as you hear the exact moment everything goes wrong. Longmont, Colorado, December 2012. If you were to pass through, nothing about this town would seem out of the ordinary. It was quiet, unremarkable, the kind of place people moved to when they wanted to settle down, to start over. For Beatriz Cintora Silva, that's exactly what she was trying to do. She had spent the last 4 years in a relationship with a man named Daniel Sanchez. By all accounts, things hadn't been perfect. But in the final months, they had become something far worse. By Thanksgiving, she was done. The relationship was over. Beatriz had moved out, cut ties, and tried to move on with her life. But Daniel wasn't ready to let go. At first, it was just messages. He wanted to talk, to explain. Then, he started showing up, outside her work, outside her home, sitting in his truck, watching, waiting. And on December 15th of that same year, things escalated. Beatriz agreed to meet him in a Best Buy parking lot to discuss a repayment of money she had loaned him. But the second he saw a message from another man on her phone, he snapped. He grabbed the phone, sent threats to the other man, and then he turned on Beatriz. He dragged her back into his truck, drove her down an empty road, and held her hostage for several hours, demanding information about her new relationship, slamming her head into the dashboard. She would eventually escape from this ordeal, immediately heading to the police. Sanchez was arrested, charged with domestic violence, kidnapping, and false imprisonment. It should have ended there, but it didn't. On December 17th, at 10 p.m., Daniel Sanchez was released from jail. Beatriz was warned, told to go somewhere safe, to stay hidden. But she didn't run. She moved in with her sister and her brother-in-law, thinking she'd be safe. For the next few hours, the house was quiet, but outside in the darkness, someone was watching. Sanchez had spent weeks stalking Beatriz. Sitting in his truck just beyond her home, watching the lights go out at night, imagining who she was with, obsessing over the life she was building without him. At some point in the early morning hours, he stepped out of his vehicle, a .45 caliber Glock in his hand. He had already made up his mind. Sanchez shot out the back door of the home to get in, moving quickly. In one of the bedrooms, Maria Cintora Silva and her husband, Max Aguirre Ojeda, had been asleep. They never got the chance to run, never even got the chance to fight back. Within seconds, Sanchez would take aim and fire. It was in this moment, somewhere in the chaos, that Beatriz made her final call for help.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
11464.
I need you to say the address. I can't understand you.
11464 Hot Springs.
Okay, repeat the address one more time to make sure I have it right.
No.
This is the moment he would shoot and take the life of Beatriz Cintora Silva. She was just 25 years old. The line is still open. There's no more screaming, only silence. And then, a voice.
Hello?
Okay, this
Hello?
is 911. What's going on?
I just shot everybody right now.
You just everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, what is your name?
Daniel Sanchez?
Pablo Sanchez?
Yeah.
Okay, how many people did you...
3.
Who people? Who did you...
My ex-girlfriend, because she was cheating on me with Roy.
Okay.
And myself, I'm going to myself right now.
Pablo, I need you to stay on the phone with me, okay? Just wait until we get there. Pablo?
Yeah.
Okay, just stay with me, okay? Don't yourself.
Okay.
Okay? Tell me exactly what happened.
Like 6 months ago, I caught my girlfriend cheating on me,
Uh-huh.
and I told Roy to stop talking to her.
Okay.
He wouldn't do it, and he pressed charges on me kidnapping. I'm not on bond, but I
Okay.
want to.
She pressed charges on you for kidnapping?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for my girlfriend. She was didn't know what she was doing.
Okay, who else was there?
What do you mean?
Who else was there with you tonight?
Right
The
now?
other two people, do you know who they were?
Her sister and her husband.
Okay. 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 How did you get there?
Driving?
You drove there?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you there by yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what room are you in right now? Pablo? Pablo?
One final gunshot. By the time officers arrived, there was nothing left to save. A total of 15 rounds were fired. The gun, a Glock 45, was still loaded when officers arrived. In one bedroom, Maria and Max lay lifeless. In another, Beatrice. Beside her, the man who had refused to let her go. Sanchez had forced his way inside. He had stalked her for weeks. He had been violent before. He had been arrested. Police knew. Beatrice knew. Everyone around her knew. But it wasn't enough. Even after everything he had done, even after kidnapping her, threatening her, laying his hands on her, he was still allowed to walk free. 4 people gone. And it all ended with a single phone call. A call that started with desperation and ended with gunfire. A recording of the exact moment when everything ended. This is the darkest audio recordings. For nearly a century, executions in the United States have been carried out in complete secrecy. No photographs, no video, no record of what actually happens when a human being is put to death by the state. But in 1998, something surfaced. A collection of 19 audio recordings documenting every electrocution carried out in Georgia since 1984. They were never meant for the public. They were recorded internally by the Georgia Department of Corrections, kept hidden away as a secret official record of the executions. These are the only known recordings of executions in the United States. And what they reveal is something the system never wanted people to hear. Because not every execution went as planned. One of these tapes captures a moment that should have never happened. A botched execution. A man put to death, not once, but twice. In the late 1800s, America was searching for a new way to kill. Hanging had long been the standard, but it was messy, unpredictable. Some executions took too long, others were over too quickly. The public wanted something more controlled, more humane. Thus, the electric chair was born. The concept was simple. The condemned would be strapped into a custom-built wooden chair, secured tightly at the wrists, ankles, and chest. A metal cap, lined with a damp sponge, would be placed over the head to help conduct the current. Electrodes would be attached to the legs. Then, the switch would be flipped. A powerful surge, up to 2,500 volts, would pass through the body, designed to cause immediate unconsciousness. A second, lower voltage cycle would follow, ensuring there was no chance of survival. At least, that's how it was supposed to work. In 1890, the first execution by electric chair was carried out in New York. It was meant to be quick. It was meant to be painless. Instead, it was a disaster. The first jolt failed to kill the man. Witnesses watched as his body convulsed, the smell of burning flesh filling the room. His skin turned black as smoke rose from his head. It took several minutes and a second, even stronger surge of electricity before he was finally declared dead. But despite this horrific display, the electric chair became the new standard for execution across the United States. By the early 1900s, it had replaced hanging in most states, eventually becoming the most widely used execution method in the country. But it didn't always go as planned. And in December of 1984, one man learned this firsthand. Alpha Otis O'Daniel Stevens sat strapped to the chair. He was convicted of taking the life of Roy Asbel, who had interrupted a burglary. Witnesses stood behind the glass, watching as the execution began. The switch was flipped. 2,400 volts surged through his body. His hands clenched, his back arched, then his body slumped forward. It should have been over. But then, as the room stood silent, the horror set in. He was still alive.
Carry out the execution by the order of the court. There's no reason to delay.
Very well. On my count of three, press your button. 1, 2, 3. The execution now has begun. There was one small jerk from the condemned at the time the execution was initiated. He is sitting very still now, and we are also now into the second phase of the execution. We're now into the third phase of the execution. No movement from the condemned, no activity or no movement from the witnesses. He appears to be relaxing a little bit more now. There's 60 seconds remaining on the third phase of the execution. There's a slight movement from the condemned's head. He seems to be moving his head from side to side slightly.
I show the time is 12:19.
Commissioner, he is still moving his head, and he seems to have slumped down in a relaxing type position in the chair. But his head is moving from side to side slightly. Commissioner, Mr. Long, the execution is completed at this time. The electrical panel box is secured and locked. I do not detect any movement from the condemned at this time. He seems to have stopped moving his head and also his arms.
I show the time is 12:20.
You are in the lapse time countdown, is that correct?
Yes, sir. We're into the first minute of the lapse time now. No movement from any of the witnesses, and at this time, no movement from the condemned. We have now completed 1 minute of lapse time, 4 minutes remaining. 2 minutes of lapse time completed at this time, 3 minutes remaining. Still, very little movement from any of the witnesses, and I detect no movement from the condemned at this time.
I show the time is 12:22.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes, sir.
There is some slight movement. He's still moving his head slightly. The only thing we can do is continue until the physicians can check him after the lapse time has expired.
Don't vary from your checklist.
Okay. Okay, we have completed 3 minutes of lapse time, 2 minutes remaining. Commissioner, Mr. Long?
Yes.
He is still moving his head slightly. Kind of a bobbing up and down movement. Commissioner?
Yes.
Mr. Long, we have completed 4 minutes of lapse time. We have 1 minute remaining. And from my vantage point, I do detect, or it seems to be, that he is breathing. Commissioner, Mr. Long, we have completed the 5 minutes lapse time. Stand by for the physician's check.
Commissioner,
Yes.
it appears, and the doctors agree with me, that he's still breathing. You want us to check him and then go through it again, or just go ahead and go through it again?
Check him and then go through him again. Definitely check him. Don't vary from the checklist.
All right.
Have them check him.
Okay. So I can't think. Do we announce that we're going to do it again?
It doesn't say so.
Okay.
It remains on.
Okay.
Time at 12:26 and 30 seconds.
Commissioner,
Yes.
doctors verify that he is still alive.
Repeat the execution.
Very well. Ready to go again? Ready.
Better check all the connections. Well,
Yes, sir.
did you tell the witnesses that you were repeating?
No, I didn't.
I think you should tell them.
Okay. Do you want me to just advise them that
Just advise that-
in the process and not go into any detail?
That's right.
Okay.
Physicians have vital signs.
Wait a minute.
Tell the physician have vital signs in your review.
Commissioner,
Final.
the superintendent is entering the execution chamber and approaching the mic at this time to advise the witnesses that we will proceed again with the execution.
Willis, if you can, tell him there were some vital signs remaining, so the execution will repeat. You can get that message to him.
Oh, it's too late now. He's already briefed him and he's on the way back in, sir.
Fine. All right.
I show the time is 12:28.
Okay, Commissioner, we'll proceed at this time.
See.
On my count of 3, you press your button. 1, 2, 3.
Commissioner, Mr. Long, the execution is initiated again at this time. The condemned made one big jerk, and now he is relaxing in the chair. I do not detect any other movement from the condemned at this time. We have completed the first and second phase of the execution. We are now into the third phase. I do detect his head moving from side to side again. We're still into the third phase of the execution. Commissioner, Mr. Long?
Yes.
He is still at this time moving his head from side to side and appears to be breathing. We'll continue just like we did previously.
You're going to have to check that electrically.
We have 15 seconds remaining on the third phase of the execution. Commissioner, Mr. Long, the third phase of the execution is completed. The equipment is switched off, secured at this time. We're now into the 5 minutes lapse time.
What is the status on condemned?
Sir, he appears to be breathing to me.
You're going to have them check those sponges and check their connections. There's something they don't have connected right, Willis, or that.
Yes, sir. You want us to go ahead and complete this whole thing and then...
Yeah, complete your phase, and then you're going to have to make your check.
Okay, sir. Commissioner, Mr. Long, we have completed 1 minute of lapse time. We have 4 minutes remaining. I might also advise at this time that I do not detect any movement from him at this time. He appears to have stopped moving. Still no movement from any of the witnesses. They were just sitting very still, observing the condemned in the chair.
Show the time at 12:32.
We have now completed 2 minutes of phase time, lapse time. We have 3 minutes remaining. Might also add that I do not detect any movement from the condemned. Commissioner, Mr. Long, we have now completed 3 minutes lapse time. We have 2 minutes remaining. There is still no movement from the condemned. Commissioner, Mr. Long, we have completed 4 minutes of lapse time. We have 1 minute remaining. Still no undetectable movement from the condemned. He does seem to have stopped moving entirely. Commissioner? Commissioner. Mr. Long, we have completed our 5 minutes lapse time. Stand by for the physician's check. At this time, the superintendent and the 2 physicians are entering the execution chambers for their check. The first doctor is now in the process of making his check for vital signs.
Show the time at 12:36. I show the time is 12:37.
The second doctor is still in the process of conducting his check for vital signs.
12:37.
The superintendent is at this time, Commissioner, Mr. Long, is in the process of briefing the witnesses that at 12:37 hours, this date, the condemned was pronounced dead. He has instructed all witnesses to depart the witness room. Back to the front of the institution. At this time, the curtains are drawn.
I get my excitement from making a woman happy.
I'll be honest, I was hesitant to cover this one. The story of David Parker Ray has been told countless times. Every detail, every disturbing fact, every theory has been covered to death by YouTubers, documentaries, and crime podcasts. By now, it feels like there's nothing left to say. But recently, something changed. For years, the infamous tape recording, the one Ray played for his victims, was only available in reenactments. Every version online was either a dramatic reading, an AI-generated voice, or a transcript read aloud. But in October of 2022, that changed. For the first time, an official real copy of David Parker Ray's Toy Box Killer tapes was released. A file pulled directly from evidence records. His real voice, speaking exactly as his victims would have heard it. David Parker Ray was never convicted of murder, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a killer. For over 40 years, women disappeared in Elephant Butte, New Mexico, a remote desert town, isolated enough for no one to hear the screams. Ray, better known as the Toy Box Killer, is suspected of taking the lives of up to 60 people. But no bodies were ever found. Ray had a method. He would kidnap women, usually sex workers, and take them to a soundproofed semi-trailer parked outside his home, a place he called the Toy Box. Inside, he had built his own version of hell. The trailer was filled with restraints, chains, medical tools, and custom-built devices. Women were kept there for weeks or even months, subjected to unimaginable abuse. Sometimes he would invite his friends. Other times his own daughter helped him. And when he was finished, he would drug his victims, leaving them disoriented and unable to recall what had happened. Some of them made it out alive, but others were never seen again. But there was one thing every victim had in common. The first thing they heard when they woke up in the toy box wasn't Ray himself. It was a tape recording, a pre-recorded message, played for every new victim. He explains that he and his lady friend, presumably his girlfriend Cindy Hendy, have been keeping slaves for years. He talks about his methods for capturing women, comparing them to pieces of meat, admitting that he has no sympathy for them. Then, he tells them exactly what's coming. At one point, Ray makes an offhand remark. He doesn't like taking anyone's life unless it's absolutely necessary. That occasionally, things happen, and if they do, the victim will be dumped in a canyon somewhere, left to rot. It's a small detail, one that could almost be overlooked, but it confirms something authorities had long suspected, that Ray was disposing of bodies, hiding them in places no one would ever think to search, which would explain why not a single victim's remains have ever been found. For decades, it remained locked away, buried in the New Mexico Department of Public Safety's archives, accessible only to law enforcement. That was until a researcher named Joseph Pasteris filed a New Mexico Inspection of Public Records Act request, asking for a digitized copy of the original recording. 15 days later, he received an MP3 file. It was the real tape. The actual recording David Parker Ray forced his victims to listen to. This tape was never meant to be heard by anyone but his victims. But now, for the first time, you're about to hear it too.
Okay, we both know what you've been brought here for. A lot of. Your wrists and ankles are chained, and you're gagged because you're not going to like the way I do it. You're going to be kept here, naked and chained down. I'm going to use you. I'm into bondage and S&M. It's kind of hard to find willing partners that goes for that shit. So when I get the urge, I go out, find me some good-looking little turns me on, kidnap her, and keep her in my playroom for a while. And this time it's your turn. I'm not going to cut you up or do anything that'll cause serious injury. And don't worry about being killed. I don't plan to do that either. As long as you don't know me, you don't present a risk. And in a week or two, when I'm through with you, you can be turned loose. And if you pass out while I'm doing this, I'll revive you with ammonia inhalants. I want you to feel every second of it. I'm sure that it goes without saying that you will not be given any opportunity to escape. A long, heavy chain is going to be kept locked around your neck all the time that you're here. Even if you did manage to get your hands and feet loose, there's no way in hell you'd get a chain over your head. I've told you exactly what I plan to do, and it's going to be painful as hell. That's the way I want it to be. If I thought that you knew enough to cause serious problems, you would not be turned loose. You would simply disappear. Don't do anything to create a situation where it might become necessary. But so much for that. I think you get the point. As soon as I turn this tape off, you will have an excellent opportunity to try to beg for me to turn you loose. I may or may not be able to understand you through the gag, but if you want to, feel free to try. I love to listen to a beg and plead. And this is the end of the tape.
David Parker Ray was sentenced to 224 years in prison. Despite being suspected of taking the lives of up to 60 people, he was never convicted of murder. The only charges that stuck were for kidnapping, after multiple victims, including Cynthia Vigil and Kelly Garrett, came forward to tell their stories. Even with the testimonies, even with the FBI sending over 100 agents to search his property, no bodies were ever found. And any chance of getting more answers ended in 2002 when David Parker Ray died of a heart attack before he could be interrogated further. The recording you just heard was real, the same one played for his victims as they woke up inside that trailer. Hearing it now, in a controlled setting, is disturbing enough. But imagine being in that room, trapped, helpless, forced to listen, knowing that every word was about to become your reality. A final message from the man who decided their fate. One that, for many, was never uncovered.